Ladies and gentlemen, love is often misunderstood as a chain, a bond that ties us to another, a possession we hold tightly, fearing that it may slip away. But true love is not about possession, nor about clinging. It is about freedom, compassion, and acceptance. To love without detachment is to open the heart fully, to allow another being to be themselves, without the urge to control, without the fear of losing, and without the craving for constant return. Love becomes suffering when attachment takes hold. We begin to mistake affection for ownership, care for control, and presence for permanence. When we attach, we create expectations, and when those expectations are not met, pain arises. But when love is pure, free from the chains of attachment, it flows naturally, like a river that nourishes everything it touches, without asking for anything in return. To love without detachment is to see others as they truly are, not as who we want them to be. It means allowing them the freedom to grow, to change, to walk their path, even when it does not align with ours. In this freedom, love does not weaken, it deepens. It becomes a force that supports instead of confines, that heals instead of hurts. Imagine the warmth of the sun. It shines without asking the flowers to bloom a certain way, without demanding the trees to grow in a specific shape. It simply gives light, and everything that receives it transforms beautifully. This is how love without detachment feels. It is radiant, unconditional, and without demands. When we practice love with awareness, we begin to see that every person we meet is a mirror, showing us where we still hold on, where we still fear, and where we still crave. In letting go of these attachments, we do not lose love. We discover a love that is vast, limitless, and unshakable. It becomes a love that is not bound to one person, but a love that extends to all beings, a love rooted in compassion and kindness. So let us learn to love in this way, not as grasping hands, but as open palms, not as a cage, but as a sky. When we release attachment, love becomes lighter, purer, and eternal. It is then that we can truly say we know how to love without detachment. Love in its purest essence is freedom, not possession. When we fall into the trap of thinking love means owning another person, we unintentionally put chains around their spirit and also around our own heart. Possession creates boundaries where there should be openness, and it limits the natural flow of affection and care. When you truly love someone, you allow them to breathe, to grow, and to explore their own path, without trying to mold them into your image or forcing them to meet your expectations. The beauty of love lies in this very freedom. The ability to stand beside another person, to support them wholeheartedly, yet never claim ownership of their existence. Love that seeks to possess is fragile, easily broken by disappointment, fear, or change. It becomes conditional, resting on whether the other person fulfills our desires or behaves according to our ideals. But love that is rooted in freedom is unshakable, because it does not rely on control. It thrives in acceptance, in the joy of witnessing another being live authentically. When you love without the urge to possess, you create space for both yourself and the other to flourish. Your presence becomes a source of comfort, not confinement, a gentle reminder of support, rather than a weight of expectation. Think of a bird resting on your hand. If you grip it too tightly out of fear that it might fly away, you harm it, and eventually it will struggle to escape. But if you keep your palm open, the bird may choose to stay or fly, and in either choice, your heart feels peace, because you honored its freedom. Love functions the same way. It must be offered with an open hand, not with a clenched fist. True connection comes not from holding someone captive, but from letting them know they are free, and yet still choosing to share their journey with you. When we replace possession with freedom in love, we also free ourselves from constant worry and insecurity. Possession breeds fear, fear of loss, fear of betrayal, fear that what we hold on to may slip away. This fear robs love of its purity, replacing joy with anxiety. But when love is free, there is no fear. You are no longer focused on keeping someone, but on giving to them, nurturing them, and celebrating their existence. Love becomes an offering instead of a demand, a gift instead of a transaction. In this kind of love, you learn to respect individuality. You understand that every soul has its own journey, and you do not stand in the way of that journey, but walk alongside it. You see the other person not as an extension of yourself, but as a unique being whose light adds to your own. That is the essence of love as freedom. It liberates, it heals, and it allows the heart to expand beyond its own limits, touching everything with gentleness and compassion. Attachment creates suffering, because it binds love with conditions, expectations, and fears. When the heart becomes attached, it begins to crave certainty and permanence, forgetting that everything in life is impermanent. This craving turns into dependency, and dependency leads to disappointment when reality does not align with what we desire. We may say we love someone, but if our love is filled with clinging, it becomes more about our own needs than the well-being of the other. Attachment disguises itself as care, but in truth it is fear, fear of loss, fear of loneliness, and fear of change. When love is ruled by attachment, we begin to measure it through outcomes. We want constant reassurance, constant attention, and constant reciprocation. If the other person changes, if they cannot meet our expectations, or if they distance themselves, the heart feels betrayed. But this suffering is not caused by love itself. It is caused by the attachment we have woven into it. Pure love does not cause pain. It is attachment that brings the ache, because attachment is rooted in control, while love is rooted in freedom. To see the difference, imagine holding water in your hands. If you squeeze tightly to keep it from slipping away, it escapes through your fingers even faster, leaving you empty. But if you hold your hand gently, the water rests there peacefully. In the same way, attachment tries to hold tightly, suffocating the relationship, while love without attachment allows flow and trust. When we cling, we create suffering for ourselves, because no person, no situation, and no moment can remain exactly as we want forever. Life is constantly moving, shifting, and transforming. The more we try to resist this truth, the more pain we create. Attachment also clouds the purity of love, because it turns selfless giving into a hidden demand. We may give kindness, affection, or support, but deep down we expect the same in return. When that expectation is not fulfilled, resentment begins to grow. This cycle of giving and expecting leads to disappointment, arguments, and misunderstandings. But love that is free from attachment gives, because it finds joy in giving. It asks for nothing in return, and therefore it cannot be hurt by unmet expectations. The suffering of attachment teaches us a profound lesson, that nothing external can be the permanent source of our happiness. If our joy depends entirely on another person's presence or behavior, then our peace is fragile and easily broken. But when we love without attachment, we discover that happiness is already within us, and love is simply the way we share that happiness. Love becomes lighter, more compassionate, and more enduring, because it does not rely on clinging. When the chains of attachment fall away, love transforms from a burden into a blessing. It no longer hurts, no longer imprisons, but instead lifts both hearts higher. Understanding this truth helps us see that to reduce suffering, we must loosen the grip of attachment and allow love to simply be. Acceptance over expectation is the foundation of a love that brings peace rather than pain. When we approach love with expectations, we unknowingly build a set of rules and conditions that the other person must fulfill for us to feel satisfied. We expect them to think a certain way, behave according to our ideals, or constantly meet our emotional needs. These expectations create invisible walls that confine the relationship. The moment the other person does not meet them, disappointment takes root, and love begins to feel heavy rather than liberating. Acceptance, however, is different. It does not demand that the other person change to fit into the mold we have created. Instead, it opens the heart to see them exactly as they are, flawed, imperfect, ever changing, yet worthy of love in their uniqueness. Acceptance teaches us that true love is not about trying to control outcomes or forcing someone to match our vision of perfection. It is about seeing them fully, with both strengths and weaknesses, and still choosing to honor their presence in our life. When we replace expectation with acceptance, we learn to stop measuring love by what we receive and start appreciating it for what it already is. Every gesture, every moment of togetherness, every act of kindness feels like a gift rather than an obligation. The relationship becomes lighter, less about demands and more about gratitude. Instead of saying, "You must do this to prove you love me," the heart says, "I am grateful for what you bring simply by being yourself." In this way, acceptance softens the heart and removes the tension that expectations create. Imagine a flower growing in a garden. If you expect it to bloom in a particular shape, color, or season, you will be disappointed when it does not meet your desire. But if you accept the flower as it is, in its own time and form, you find beauty in its natural expression. Love works in the same way. It blossoms in its own rhythm, and when we let go of our rigid expectations, we begin to see its beauty more clearly. Acceptance also nurtures patience. It allows us to understand that people are on their own journeys, with lessons to learn and challenges to overcome. They may stumble, they may not always respond as we wish, but acceptance gives them the space to grow without judgment. Through this space, love matures into compassion. Instead of criticizing or demanding, we offer understanding and support, which strengthens the bond rather than weakens it. Expectations often come from fear. Fear of not being loved enough, fear of being abandoned, fear of being unimportant. But acceptance dissolves this fear because it shifts our focus from what we lack to what we already have. It reminds us that love is not about control, but about trust. Trust that the other person is walking their path honestly. Trust that the bond is genuine, and trust that love, when nurtured with acceptance, will always find its way. Unconditional giving is the essence of love that is pure and unburdened. It is the kind of love that does not ask, "What will I receive in return?" but instead gives because giving itself is a joy. When love becomes a transaction, weighed down by expectations, it loses its natural beauty. But when love is unconditional, it becomes a limitless source of warmth. Like the sun that shines on all, without asking for anything back. This giving nature transforms both the one who loves and the one who is loved, creating harmony and peace instead of conflict and demand. The power of unconditional giving is that it frees the heart from disappointment. When you offer kindness, care, or support without expecting something in return, you cannot be hurt when the gesture is not reciprocated. Instead, the act of giving itself brings fulfillment. The simple fact that you were able to bring comfort, joy, or relief to another person becomes its own reward. This is the purity of love, a love that finds happiness in seeing others happy, even when there is no recognition or return. Unconditional love teaches us to let go of the need for constant reassurance. Often, people give with the hidden hope that they will be praised, loved more, or remembered for their efforts. But this attachment to outcomes brings disappointment. True giving is quiet, humble, and selfless. It is like a candle lighting another candle. Its own flame is not diminished, but the world becomes brighter. The candle does not ask the other flame to thank it. It simply shares its light, because that is its nature. To practice unconditional giving, one must also cultivate inner strength. It requires patience, compassion, and a heart that is not seeking validation. This does not mean allowing oneself to be taken advantage of, but it does mean shifting the focus from me to we. When the heart is centered in compassion, the joy of giving outweighs the desire to receive. Such love heals wounds, strengthens relationships, and creates bonds that are unbreakable, because they are not tied to conditions. Consider the love of a parent for a child. In its truest form, it is unconditional. A parent does not keep track of how many times the child returns affection. The parent gives endlessly, with the simple intention of nurturing and supporting the child's growth. This love is powerful because it expects nothing yet gives everything. When we extend this same unconditional approach to our relationships, friendships, and even strangers, our love becomes universal, limitless, and healing. Unconditional giving also brings freedom. When you no longer calculate or expect, your heart is light, unburdened by disappointment or resentment. You give, and in that giving, you are already complete. The act itself nourishes your spirit, and your love becomes a natural expression of who you are. In this way, love transforms into a source of inner peace, radiating outward to touch everyone around you without boundaries or conditions. Awareness in love means being fully present, conscious, and mindful in how we give and receive affection. So often, love is clouded by unconscious patterns, fear, insecurity, craving, or the urge to control. When we lack awareness, we confuse these patterns with love itself, and as a result, relationships become heavy with misunderstandings and suffering. Awareness allows us to step back and see clearly what is truly happening within us and within the bond we share. It helps us recognize whether our actions are guided by compassion or by attachment, whether our words heal or hurt, and whether our presence uplifts or weighs down the other person. To cultivate awareness in love, one must first observe the self. When we feel jealousy, fear of losing someone, or the desire to control them, awareness shines a light on these emotions. Instead of acting on them blindly, we pause and understand where they come from. Perhaps they arise from our past wounds, perhaps from insecurity, or perhaps from an illusion that love means possession. By observing these emotions without judgment, we prevent them from dictating our behavior. In this way, awareness protects love from being poisoned by negative patterns. When awareness is present, communication also becomes clearer. Many conflicts in love come not from a lack of care, but from a lack of understanding. With awareness, we learn to listen deeply, not just to words but to feelings beneath them. We begin to sense when the other person is hurt, when they need space, or when they long for support. Awareness transforms listening into an act of love, and this attentive presence often matters more than any material expression of affection. Awareness also means being mindful of the impermanence of life. Everything changes, people grow, circumstances shift, and relationships evolve. Without awareness, we may resist these changes, clinging to the way things once were. But with awareness, we accept that change is natural, and instead of fighting it, we adjust with compassion and patience. This makes love more resilient, as it adapts rather than breaks under the weight of change. When awareness touches love, it also prevents us from making the other person the sole source of our happiness. We realize that, while they add beauty to our lives, our inner peace must come from within. This awareness keeps the relationship healthy, because we no longer demand from others what we must cultivate ourselves. We begin to share love not from emptiness or need, but from fullness. Finally, awareness makes love expansive. It is not limited to one person, but grows into compassion for all beings. The same mindfulness that helps us care for a partner also teaches us to extend kindness to friends, family, and even strangers. In this way, awareness purifies love, turning it into a force that is vast, patient, and deeply healing. Love guided by awareness becomes a light that cannot be shaken, for it is rooted in clarity, not in illusion. Expansive compassion is the natural flowering of love when it is free from attachment and expectation. It begins with the love we feel for those closest to us, but with awareness and practice, it grows beyond personal relationships and extends to all beings. This kind of love is not bound by conditions, preferences, or personal gain. It is rooted in the understanding that every living being seeks happiness, safety, and peace, just as we do. When the heart opens in this way, love becomes limitless, no longer confined to one person or one circle, but shared with the world. Expansive compassion requires us to see others with empathy. Instead of focusing only on our own desires, we begin to recognize the struggles, pains, and aspirations of those around us. This awareness softens the heart and dissolves judgment. We no longer view people as enemies, competitors, or strangers, but as fellow travelers on the same path of life. When compassion grows to this level, even those who hurt us are seen with understanding, for we realize their actions often come from their own suffering. This universal love does not weaken personal bonds, rather, it strengthens them. When we learn to love beyond attachment, the love we give to one person is not diminished by the love we extend to others. Just as a candle can light many flames without losing its own brightness, the heart can embrace countless beings without running out of warmth. Expansive compassion actually makes our personal love more stable, because it is not rooted in fear of loss, but in a deep well of kindness that never dries. Living with expansive compassion also brings peace to the one who loves. When love is limited only to a few, it is vulnerable. If those few relationships change or end, suffering arises. But when love is vast, it cannot be broken by the impermanence of life. Even when circumstances shift, the heart remains open, because its love is not dependent on one source. This creates a profound inner strength, a sense of peace that remains steady regardless of external changes. To cultivate this compassion, one must practice letting go of narrowness and self-centeredness. Small acts of kindness, even toward those we do not know, expand the heart. Offering a smile, showing patience, or wishing well for someone silently are all ways to strengthen this universal love. Over time, these practices transform the heart into a boundless space where all beings are welcome. When compassion becomes expansive, it reshapes the way we live. Our choices, our words, and our actions naturally aim to reduce harm and increase well-being for others. Love becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a way of life. This is the highest form of love, not confined to one person, not fragile or fearful, but limitless, fearless, and deeply healing. It is a love that embraces all, just as the sky embraces the earth, without condition or end. Thanks for watching.